Hello everyone, welcome to a Second Thoughts overview of Tyrion of the High Elves. I played through the initial turns and observed the victory conditions, starting location, diplomacy, mechanics, buildings, units, you know it! And I took my own conclusions about how the faction plays out, their strengths and weaknesses, so later in the video I'll show some army compositions for you guys. This is a brief overview, should not be, as always, considered a fully in-depth guide, although it will help you out for certain. Now without further ado, let's go play with Tyrion. For our short victory condition, it is, well, quite lengthy and difficult. We must destroy both the Cult of Pleasure and Naggarond. Look at it quite far away. We also need to occupy, loot, raise or sack 30 different settlements. Now, should we complete this, of course, hero capacity +3 for all heroes, that's the reward. Very good reward to ensure we don't need too many buildings to recruit those in the mid-game, at least. Now, in terms of the long campaign, you need to achieve the short victory, of course. Occupy, loot, raise or sack 70 different settlements. And you also need to maintain control of several of these provinces, either directly or vassals and military allies. That is basically this. The whole of Ulthuan, in essence. And then you need to destroy both the Cult of Pleasure and Naggarond. That was included in the short victory, of course. But then you also need to destroy Haggrief, located in the north of the Chaos Wastes. The Blessed Dread, located completely on the other side of the map. I mean, look at this. There it is. And the Thousand Maws, which is all the way down here. Now, I don't need to tell you how difficult that is. It's really extensive. You may even obtain the Domination campaign before you achieve that. Now, should we achieve this, of course, Hero Recruit +10, that would be nice, although may come very late in the campaign, depending on if you have the luck of these factions being destroyed before you need to get them. Yeah, sure, but it's really, really uncertain if this bonus will even account for anything, unless you're going for total world domination. Now, Tyrion is the Majesty of Ulthuan, implying that he benefits from diplomatic relations with the High Elves, less construction time for the Shrine of Cain, more on that on the mechanics, and then recruitment duration -1 for infantry and cavalry units, now a minimum of 1. This is a good buff. It ensures that you can recruit the early to mid units much faster overall. Now, in terms of climates, well, it's not really the best. Basically, the best way to show you is like this. Unless you're going into this area into the north and in Ulthuan, and even Ulthuan has some regions where you have unpleasant climate, most of the other places are either unpleasant or uninhabitable with their respective debuffs that I'm going to show here. So as you can see, you will always have some issues in terms of particularly construction costs, the construction time, the casualty replenishment. All of those are always kind of difficult to overcome, and most likely your provinces outside of Ulthuan, outside of this region, will always be underdeveloped, basically. Now, you do have a great starting location, one of the best, honestly, highly defensible. Although it may not seem like it, it is really defensible to hold on to Lothern. 4 settlement province, so if not all of your military is still possible to be built here. Now, typical expansions is, of course, to take over the whole island if possible, and then going into Naggarond, into this region to the north, since that's where your climate conditions are leading you to, and of course into the areas of Marathi's presence here. Now, 2 extra notes. You do start with a mage, which is excellent, and you can also start near the ocean. Of course, you start near the ocean, so you can always take advantage of these goodies that you may find. So, of course, that helps into the overall easiness of this starting location. Now, in terms of diplomacy, you're part of the Order Tide. Basically, Empire, Bretonnia, Kislev, the Dwarves, all of them should certainly become your friends. However, you are most certainly the faction with more difficulty to enter that inner circle. Now, some keen diplomacy is required to ensure you become their friend and ally to capitalize on it. Now, Dark Elves and the Nakari, of course, over here, the Vampire Coasts as well, will be your main enemies for some time. And of course, Chaos may wish to come at you. If should you conquer the whole island, then certainly you may have some invasions from the north. Now, outposts in this regard. You should perhaps focus on anything that has armor-piercing cavalry, which you lack, some good artillery for your forces, maybe some from Bretonnia and Reichland. Let me show you some options here. So as you can see, basically Bretonnia for that infamous cavalry, the flying cavalry is also nice. You can be a very good flying faction because you already have the monsters then. Of course, some artillery from the Empire and the Demogryph Knights, also a good option. And from the Dwarves, maybe some solid front line. Even though you do have infantry there, you may choose to use theirs. Some artillery or specific missile units, as you can see there, all in good shape to consider for your decent armies, of course. As for mechanics, you do have access to the Sword of Cain. Now, by occupying the Shrine of Cain and constructing the Shrine of the Widowmaker, you can unlock it. You do have a bonus with Tyrion that, you know, the construction time is much less, minus 50%. So you can use and gain access to this really fast. One of the characters that gets the fastest to the Shrine of Cain. However, of course, always remember that you will incur into public order and diplomacy issues with taking the sword, so that's up to you to not have it, basically, or to have it or not have it. Tyrion, however, may become nearly unstoppable should you give him the sword, so it's certainly a nice playthrough option for you. Now, we do have influence here. Influence affects two things. Number one, you can affect how other factions deal with one another. You can improve their relationships or decrease their relations for whatever purpose you wish, basically. You can interfere with the natural course of things, which is an excellent mechanic. If you wish to put two other if you wish, you can interfere with how they perceive you or how they perceive others. That may be even the best part, to try and get someone to war against one another, and then you intercede in the middle of that. Now, you also have to use influence to recruit lords. As you can see here, it requires 30 for Alistair the White Lion, or for even archmages. If you want to go through the mages that do not have bad traits, such as these ones, as you can see, then you would need to invest some influence. For instance, to get these ones, which are much better, the administrator here, all of these ones cost only 15, which are really cool. There's a lot of that. This is quite a good, decent mechanic from the High Elves, because it gives you so much flexibility in terms of army composition. These traits are always nice, so you may wish to build up an army just based on, for instance, the fact that this guy gets ammunition plus 20%. Maybe you wish to give him more missile unit-based compositions. So that's the sort of the idea around this. Now, in terms of rights, you do have the rights mechanic, and 4 of them, as usual: immune to attrition in the Invocation of Isha, casualty replenishment rate, and minus corruption. All good things, all wonderful, especially when you're conquering corrupted areas. You also have an Invocation of Hoeth, as the name goes, into the Sword Masters or Lore Masters of Hoeth. So basically, you get more Winds of Magic power reserve, more experience gain for your mages or caster units, and some hero action success for those casters as well. Always perfect, especially for multiplayer. Never neglect the action success change. Of course, in player versus AI is also important, but for multiplayer this can be quite a game changer. Now, for the Invocation of Asuryan, a typical one with influence per turn, one of your per turn sources. Construction costs minus 15% and control plus 4 to all provinces. Always useful, always useful. And then the Invocation of Vol. A nice dilemma will offer a powerful magic item, so you can have a magical item via this, and also some good buffs for the most elite infantry units that you have. Phoenix Guard, White Lions, Sword Masters, and also to Dragon Princes. Also a good idea here. Now, a special remark that they are not costly at all. You know, this helps to ensure that you have at least one of these active at all times, honestly. They do have some conditions on whether they can be performed, but all of them are very easy, honestly. One rather specific mechanic is this line on most lords. The dedication line. You can dedicate to different heroes, or actually gods, I believe these are gods, or deities. Yes, gods or deities from the High Elves, and they give different bonuses, either for a campaign or for specific units, so you may use them for one or the other, and of course it will help you go into specific army combinations should you wish, of course. For instance, leadership +5 for shared units, it may not be too important, but to have some reduced upkeep for dragon units, for instance, they already cost a lot, so 5% is significant. And to have some reduced upkeep for spearmen, rages, and archers may help you in the early game. So it's up to you which ones to dedicate to, of course. As for province edicts, we have a campaign movement range reduction for enemies, enemy hero action success, ambush success chance, and a bigger chance for you to intercept armies using the underways, etc. Now, a small note here. It's not that useful in Ulthuan. Why? Because in Ulthuan, no army can use any of those, because, well, that would reduce the gates to basically nothing. So there's no way for you to use underways or any of those types of army stances here. So this is useful outside of Ulthuan, basically. Now you also have an income from trade tariffs, faction-wide, and income from all buildings one. Nice. Some more gold always helps. Recruit rank +1 and local recruitment capacity. First, of course, the recruit rank not that useful, still useful, but not the best one. Local recruitment capacity, of course, it always helps. Then we have a -5 to corruption. It's always really good, especially how you start because you always have someone trying to corrupt your places. And then you have growth and construction cost. Now, basically, this is what is kind of like the standard ones. Now, combining these edicts with the rights that we checked on the mechanics, it should give you amazing flexibility to counter all things that are negative. Unfortunately, nothing here provides influence, which would help a lot into the mechanics of the faction. In terms of army stances, basically you do have some Lilith's Blessing. This is the Winds of Magic. It does provide some experience gain for spellcasters, less miscast based chance as well, and speed. So if you're about to enter a battle, you can actually have this one and engage in the battle, and of course your casters will have those bonuses, so never forget this. You should almost always be engaging with this, especially if you know that the enemy is not going to run away. So you can use this, and of course your casters will be much better for that fight. You also have Encamp, typical. Access to global recruitment, enables replenishment, immune to attrition, and then campaign movement range you need 50% to engage in this one. Ambush 35%. Nothing too out of the ordinary, and of course the forced march. Do note the absence of any raiding stance. You cannot raid as the High Elves. Now, Lothern has two great buildings, both for income, as you can see here, and also for general buffs for your faction. Plenty of special buildings that are all around Ulthuan as well, so you'll soon learn all of them and adapt your construction plans. Now for military, it requires 7 different buildings. Yikes. However, 2 of them can be fully built in minor settlements. That helps. This implies that you can actually build them in your initial province. Now, the tier 3 units are quite formidable already, such as you have some Silverin Guards, some Shadow Warriors, some Lothern Sea Guard with shields. Nothing too out of the blue. They're really cool. Silver Helms with shields, decent cavalry, Tyrannok chariots, some Eagle Claws, War Lions, and some White Lions here, of course. So all of these tier 3 units are really good. Of course, the faction really shines once you reach tier 4 and 5, with Sisters of Avalorn, with some Lion Chariots of Trace, and some Sword Masters, and Phoenix Gods, and of course Dragon Princes and the Star Dragons, and also the Phoenixes. So Tier 4 is where the gold is, basically where the good elite units are, but Tier 3, they're quite formidable. As for infrastructure, we have a growth and casualty replenishment rate building, an income building with some additional trinkets produced there, some elven trinkets, so resource. We also have a second income generation and plus control building. Then we have the noble unlocking building, which also provides income from entertainment buildings. Read from this one. And finally, an elven embassy, which gives you influence per turn. This, don't neglect this. It's especially in the early to mid game, it's very valuable to at least have a steady income of influence per turn. Now, basically, of course, it also gives some income from ports, income from trade tariffs, so it also helps in that regard. It pays off to have at least one or two overall, even if it is just to unlock the technologies. It gives some steady income per turn. Because they have two income buildings, they will get a lot of money, trust me. Now, in terms of research is one of the most complete ones, actually. Lots of stuff to get, although most of them do require some specific buildings, so you'll have to check which ones, and to ensure that, should you want gem setting, you need to build a gem cutter's atelier. So be sure that you find a source of gems so that you can do that. Course. Now, nearly every unit in the High Elf roster is actually buffed up by these specific military advancements that you see here, so be sure to use those so that you can have much stronger tier 1, 2, 3 units compared than to your enemies. Once you reach the later one, honestly, as soon as you finish up all of your research, your units are crazy powerful. You'll be able to tackle anything in the game for certain. As always, we have our Lord-specific skills. We have the melee or the casting line, red line or army, blue line or campaign. Tyrion himself can choose to become like a campaign god, honestly. I mean, look at those buffs. To global recruitment, to control, upkeep, to all armies, it's crazy good. Or he can be a battle god, honestly, with the bloodline of an Aryan. It's up to you to choose which one you would prefer. He also gets the dedication, so again, another way to customize this wonderful lord. Now, in terms of the blue line, it does have my favorites, which is upkeep and replenishment. Of course, you also have Elven Scholar, which helps, which is for research rate, but it will imply so much expenditure here on the blue line that you may wish to forgo that. A Merchant Lord, a note here, this was previously bugged, so I have no idea if it is still. Hopefully it is not, because it certainly feels like a good one to use to get to to the next part of the line. In terms of the red line, there's good in combination with these dedications. You'll have some decent army combinations and just average spending of skill points, as we'll see later. A specific note that Tyrion himself has a combined deletes. These are basically two of the red line skills combined into just one, which is perfect for him to have. Just spend 3 skill points there and you have access to most of the buffs for the low quality troops, which is excellent, especially in the beginning. So you'll have definitely the option of having a very early based game, really fast, really useful, really easy. Honestly, that's the idea. Now, heroes are excellent. They provide some great alternatives with the Handmaiden for anything that is archer-based. Lore masters are really hybrids between casters and good warriors. Nobles are decent fighters, and of course, mages himself. You have a ton of typical, a ton of lores that you can use. So combine all of these to have amazing types of armies. Everything that you can muster and imagine. You do also have 2 heroes with the replenish ability, which are the Handmaiden and the Noble. So you'll most always have one or the other, so that is great. You always will have some replenishment. It's one of the factions that has no issues in that regard. Now here we have all the red line skills for your High Elf armies. take a look at, of course, everything that can be buffed and which units are buffed by which ones. A high note here for Tyrion, he includes Militia Master and Cavalry Master in just one with the combined elites, which is perfect to ensure that you always have some use for those early to tier 3 units, basically. Now, therefore, there's a lot of combinations here. Of course, you have one for the monsters, one for the elite infantry, some chariots and cavalries here. Everything that is missile is over here. So it is actually quite average in terms of the expenditure of red line skills to buff an entire army. Unbalanced army composition, of course, that's what I'm talking about. Tyrion can be a menace, either with lower quality troops or with higher quality troops. So he can enhance all of them without costing too many skill points. So this ensures also that it can have a nice transition. Should the army starts to struggle with a specific foe, you can always transition to a more dedicated high tier army, basically. Now, as for army compositions themselves, you can't go wrong with combinations between Phoenix God and some Sisters of Avalon, some monsters, some sword masters here, or go into, instead of the monsters, go into just the most mobile in terms of the cavalry there. It's up to your choice. Now this one, for instance, is one that I got for a specific hero or a specific lord, actually. This is because it had significant buffs for Lothern Sea God and Illyrian Reavers, so of course I went with this kind of combination. These are excellent sweeper armies. The High Elves have about the best in terms of that regard, because nearly every single lord has a specific buff, even if it is just reduced upkeep for specific units, which helps so much. Now, one extra one is the additional Legendary Lord with Alistair. Now, as you can see here, he gives all the buffs to everything that is a lion. White Lions of Trace, the lions as well, the war lions, and the lion chariot units. So of course you can make such an army like this. I used this exact army in one playthrough, even in Warhammer 2. So you can imagine how in Warhammer 3, with some some melee debuffs for the AI, you can imagine how well this one will go. It's much better right now. So I can assure you that you can for certain use up Alistair in the best way possible with just this specific army. Of course, you may wish to have different units, but I'll always advise so that you can experience different units with overall with the faction. In terms of a final conclusion, so Tyrion is probably one of the easiest starts in the whole game. And the faction has a lot of synergy throughout, in essence. So between the rights, between the province edicts, between the buildings, the traits of the units, everything. It's just so easy to make some good synergies with this faction. Now, were it not for the victory conditions, I would always recommend this for your first faction. However, with these victory conditions, I'm uncertain whether it should. Now, the Sword of Cain does allow you to have at least a second go at the faction, you know, just to see how it plays out being the evil one, if you wish. Now, research and magic combined with the powerful army roster give you one of the best armies in the entire game, capable of going against anything with these. So your army is mostly composed of great infantry, great missile infantry, good cavalry and chariots, they do like some armor piercing there, great single entities, average artillery, and they do like early armor piercing. Now, replenishment is good overall. Plenty of options for you to reinforce as well due to the global recruitment too. Now I believe it is now time for you to play for Tyrion of the High Elves.